Have you ever like been walking down the grocery aisle and suddenly you just have to have that super specific brand of chips,
Yeah.
even though, usually you're totally fine with the store brand? Or how about this? Have you noticed that like certain news stories, they just seem to be everywhere all at once? Makes you think, right? Because today we're going deep, really deep into mind control, manipulation, and deception and persuasion too.
Right, right. And I think it's so interesting how these ideas, they aren't just like stuff from spy movies, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
totally. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
way more every day than we realize, I bet.
Uh,
So that's kind of our mission for this deep dive. We're going to break all this down, figure out how it works, and see if maybe it's happening to us without us even knowing.
exactly. And the stuff we've got to work with here, it's pretty fascinating. Like right off the bat, they make this distinction between mind control and brainwashing. Apparently, brainwashing is like newer, really take off as a term around the Korean War. And it's often about, well, pretty forceful methods, even violent sometimes, to get people to do what you want.
Brainwashing. Yeah. It's a heavy word for sure. You hear that and you immediately think of like prisoners, maybe cults, that kind of thing. And the text does say that's kind of how the term started,
Yeah.
explaining why some American POWs in Korea were acting, well, out of character. But there's this interesting point that brainwashing, like the principles of it, could maybe be used for good stuff too.
Yeah, that's a thought, isn't it? And even though people use mind control and brainwashing as if they're the same thing, like in casual conversation, our sources here, they say those are actually pretty different in how they work.
That makes sense. Okay, so one question I always have with this stuff is like, is it permanent? If someone's been, manipulated, or they just stuck that way forever?
Well, the good news is our material says reversing mind control. It is possible. So it's not like a life sentence for your brain or anything.
Oh, phew. That's
Huh.
a relief to hear, honestly. But I gotta imagine it's not always simple, right?
Right, it's definitely not simple. How effective the mind control is and how reversible, it really depends on a lot of factors. Like how many techniques are used on the person and the whole relationship between the manipulator and the victim, that matters a lot.
Okay, so, like, what are some of the things that make mind control more intense or harder to break free from?
Well, the more techniques that are used on someone and the longer they're exposed to it, the harder it is.
Right.
Makes sense, right? And then how strong their connections are outside of that controlling relationship, like with family and friends, that can make a huge difference. Oh, and this is disturbing, but the material says that sexual abuse and hypnosis, those can make it way worse.
Mhm.
And I mean, this one's probably obvious, but the more direct contact someone has with the person controlling them, the stronger that hold becomes.
Yeah, you're painting a pretty scary picture here.
Mm.
Isolation, intense stuff happening, it's like a recipe for getting trapped. Are there any, like, real-life stories in our material that show this in action?
There is one. It's about a woman who was, well, abused for 6 years. What really struck me was how she talked about feeling like a hostage in her own home, like unable to live a normal life at all. And it came to a head when she tried to leave, take her kids and go. Her partner, he actually confronted her with a sword.
A sword.
Yeah.
Seriously. That's terrifying.
It is. And the really messed up part, at least according to the source, is that his big fear wasn't losing her or even the kids. It was about losing control over her. After 6 years of, well, basically owning her, that was all he knew.
It's like she became, I don't know, like a possession to him almost, not a person.
Hmm.
What about the lasting impact, though? How does this kind of thing affect someone in the long run?
Well, our text makes a point of saying that emotional abuse, it often leaves deeper scars than physical abuse, the kind that you can see. This woman, it took her 5 years to just adjust to living on her own, making her own choices. And this isn't uncommon, apparently. Lots of people who've been through stuff like this say the mental and emotional damage, it's way worse than any physical pain.
Makes you think, right? You figure a broken bone heals, but this,
Yeah.
this is like breaking someone's spirit almost.
Yeah.
It's so hard to come back from that. And it really makes you wonder how widespread this kind of thing is. I was surprised by how many areas of life the book says manipulation can happen in.
Oh, yeah, the list is long. Let's see, there's religion, politics, philosophy, science, even sports. Oh, and meditation and all those healing therapies, personal development stuff, and then all sorts of money-making things like network marketing and the stock exchange goes on.
Huh.
Psychology, plastic surgery, Western medicine, media, education, even hairdressing. Can you believe it?
Hairdressing. Seriously. I mean, now I'm picturing like my stylist going, "Oh, honey, your split ends, they're just screaming for this deep conditioning treatment." But all jokes aside, that's a huge range. It really makes the point that, this isn't just about some shady group of evil masterminds. This stuff, it's about how we all interact, how influence works on a basic human level.
Absolutely. And a book warns that anyone can get caught up in cult-like stuff or mind control without even realizing it's happening. The best we can hope for, they say, is that whoever's doing it, they don't mean any harm, or that we catch on before it gets too bad.
Right, because it's not always some big organized group either.
Right.
The material mentions that individuals, even like serial killers and psychopaths, they can use mind control too.
Yeah, and there's this really creepy thought that the book throws out. They ask us to imagine being out in public and think about how many people we see might be under someone else's influence. It definitely changes how you look at everyone, doesn't it?
Like suddenly you're super aware of all these hidden power dynamics.
Yeah. And speaking of power, the book spends some time on the word cult, which, I mean, that word comes with a lot of baggage, right? And turns out the original meaning was pretty different.
Yeah, cult comes from the Latin word cultus, which actually just means a belief in some power that runs the universe, or like the act of worshiping that power. So it didn't start out meaning those like fringe groups that we usually think of today.
Nope, not at all. Our source here actually says that, strictly speaking, that original definition could apply to, well, pretty much any religious group, like all the big established ones too.
Wow, that's a big shift in perspective. So the way we use cult now, talking about those newer, often more extreme groups, that's actually a more narrow way of seeing it.
Right. And the book suggests that remembering that older, broader meaning, it can help us understand the power dynamics within any group, really, especially religious ones.
It's like it makes it clear that the potential for influence, it's kind of baked into any system where people believe strongly in something. And, speaking of power and belief, the book gets into some really disturbing examples of how that can go wrong.
Yeah, like the whole Catholic Church scandal with pedophile priests. They talk about that as a major example of abusing authority and, in a way, mass mind control. The book points out the abuse itself, obviously, and then the cover-up that went on for years and years. And they say part of the problem was the church's own rules about priesthood, which made it super hard to, kick those guys out. Plus, they mention blackmail happening at high levels, which makes it even darker and more complicated.
It's just awful. Such a clear example of power corrupting people and yeah, how institutions can fail so badly at protecting the people who're supposed to care for. And then there are the infamous cases like Jim Jones and David Koresh. Those guys are like almost textbook examples of what happens when religious belief and mind control go really, really wrong.
Yeah, for sure. And the book really emphasizes how those guys used people's faith and these manipulation techniques to basically control every single aspect of their followers' lives, like what they ate, who they could talk to, everything. They even had punishments for people who disobeyed. And with Koresh, it was even worse, right? He was controlling who people married and, well, he was abusing young girls. Remember that messed up Viju pendant he wore?
It's just horrifying. Yeah. Mind control plus intense religious beliefs, it can really strip people of everything. Their freedom, their morals, even their ability to think for themselves. So zooming in a bit, how does this actually start, like on a personal level? What are the first steps a manipulator takes?
Well, the first stage, it's all about getting close to someone and building trust. They call it establishing a connection. And the book says often they'll act like they just want to be friends, get to know you. That way you let your guard down.
Classic, right? Seems like a genuine friend, someone you can confide in, but then, bam, the manipulation starts.
Exactly. And the thing is, these manipulators, they're always watching, sizing people up. They're looking for weaknesses, anything that might make you easy to control. They're paying attention to your body language, what you say, everything.
Like profiling people, what kind of like nonverbal stuff would they be looking for?
All sorts of things. Like if you're standing with your arms crossed, maybe that means you're insecure or defensive. Posture that looks weak could mean you lack confidence. Even taking big strides when you walk, which you think is confident, they say that can sometimes mean you're not so sure of yourself deep down. And then there's fidgeting or blinking a lot. That might mean you're lying or uncomfortable. The point is, we're always sending out signals about how we feel, even if we don't realize it. And good manipulators, they know how to read those signals.
So it's like, be mindful of your body language. People are watching. Okay, so once they've decided you're a good target, how do they actually build that trust, make you fall for it?
Well, the material talks about these three personas we all have. Our private persona, that's who we really are deep down. Then there's the public persona. That's how we act around everyone. And then there's our reputation, how people see us. First impressions matter a lot, right? So the manipulator, they're going to figure out which persona you're showing and decide if you're worth the effort.
It's kind of cold, isn't it? Like, is this person worth manipulating?
Pretty much. But if they think you are, that's when they start adapting, changing how they act to match you. They'll do things and say things to get your attention and make you trust them. Basically, they're sending four messages. I like you, we're alike, you can trust me, and you'll benefit from being close to me.
So the same stuff you do when you make a friend, only with a hidden agenda.
Exactly. And it's not always step by step either. A really good manipulator, they can switch things up depending on how you react, but the goal is always the same. Connect with you and get you to trust them.
Okay, connections made, trust is building. What's next in this mind control playbook?
The next stage is called unweaving the past. Basically, they want to separate you from your values, your beliefs, your friends and family, everything that makes you you. That way, you're more open to what they want you to believe. So they'll often try to make you feel bad about your past, like it was all wrong or it's the reason you're unhappy now.
It's like making you doubt yourself, your choices, everything, so that you're desperate for something new, something they can offer.
Exactly. And to do this, they'll try to isolate you. They might get you involved in like exclusive groups or events, or just find ways to make you spend less time with your loved ones. The less contact you have with people outside their control, the better for them.
It's like they're cutting all your lifelines, so you have to depend on them. And I remember the book mentions some even more mess up tactics, right? Like messing with your food and sleep.
Yeah, they talk about cults and abusive relationships where they might restrict how much you eat, like making you think it's for health reasons. But really, they're trying to weaken you, make you tired and less able to think clearly. And then there's sleep deprivation, keeping you up late or just making things chaotic. A tired brain is easier to control.
Ugh, that's awful. And they even talk about public confessions, especially in cults, as a way to break down your boundaries and make you more dependent on the group.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff. And then there's the way they use information you've shared with them, secrets or personal stuff. They can twist that against you, humiliate you, make you doubt your own reality. It's all part of breaking you down.
It's scary how calculated it is. So once they've basically wiped the slate clean with your past, what happens next? How do they get you to believe their stuff?
This is where they start selling their own beliefs as the answer to all your problems. If it's a group, anyone who disagrees, they get kicked out or made fun of, to make an example of them. And even people who leave the group, they get used as proof that their beliefs are right. The manipulator will say those people weren't ready or didn't understand the truth.
Wow, so they can't lose. Every situation just proves their point somehow.
Right. And they're really good at manipulating your emotions too. First, they make you miserable and confused, and then they offer you this amazing feeling like they're the only ones who can save you. And in a group, there's all that peer pressure, everyone believing the same thing, so it's even harder to resist.
So it's a cycle.
Yeah.
Break you down, then build you back up in their image.
Exactly. And the goal is to get you to believe that all these new thoughts and actions, they're all yours, not something they put in your head. That's when they know they've really got you, because you're not fighting back anymore.
That's the terrifying part, when you don't even realize how controlled you are. But let's say someone does realize what's happening. Can they ever come back from that?
Well, the book says it takes time, just like it takes time for the mind control to work in the first place. And therapy can be a big help. But the important thing is to get away from the person or group that's controlling you. Without that, it's almost impossible to break free.
It's good to know there's hope, though. But why do people stay in these situations? From the outside, it seems so obvious they should just leave.
That's the thing about mind control. It makes you dependent on the person who's doing it. Like emotionally dependent, but sometimes even for basic stuff like money or housing.
Yeah.
They've stripped away your confidence, your ability to imagine a life without them. It's like being a prisoner, but in your own mind.
Okay, so we talked about individuals, but the book takes it a step further, right? They talk about mind control on a bigger scale, like with governments and corporations.
Right. They say these big institutions, they're usually more interested in keeping things stable, making everyone conform, than they are in controlling each individual person. But by making everyone think the same way, it's easier to get people to obey.
So it's less about controlling you directly and more about shaping the whole environment so you don't even realize you're being influenced.
Huh.
But it's still about stopping people from thinking critically, right?
Exactly. Like with individual mind control, they want you to think you're making your own choices, while really it's the media, the language we use, everything around us that's shaping our thoughts. And the book gives some specific examples of how they do this.
Like what? Give us the details.
Well, they start with education. They say that, organized schools can be used for mass brainwashing. They use the example of the Hitler Youth, which is pretty extreme. But the
Hmm.
point is, schools can teach you to blindly obey, to conform from a very young age. They call it deposit education, where you just get fed information without being taught to question it or think for yourself.
It's scary how something meant for good, like learning, can be twisted into a tool for control. And the book really contrasts that with what they say the true purpose of education should be: to teach people how to think critically, be creative, and make the world a better place.
Exactly. They argue that in the long run, trying to control what people think, it actually weakens a society. It only really benefits a small group at the top who then exploit everyone else.
It makes you think about what's really being taught in schools and who benefits from it. And then there's the whole world of advertising and propaganda. The book gets pretty real about that too.
They actually say that marketing, when you get down to it, is just mind control with a friendly face. They describe it as figuring out what people want, or even creating those wants, and then getting inside your head so you buy their stuff.
Mhm.
And they use ads and propaganda to do this with short, catchy messages that stick with you.
I mean, I hate to admit it, but they might have a point there. Think about how much advertising shapes what we think we need. They even talk about how branding on clothes, it's basically us paying to advertise for companies.
It's true. We're like walking billboards. And with how much information is flying around these days, it's almost impossible to know when you're being marketed to, especially since they're getting so good at making it look natural.
Yeah, it's sneaky. But then the book gets even more specific, talking about how marketers try to understand different personality types. They use the system of four basic personality colors. Sounds familiar.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely heard of that. It's like some people are motivated by pity, they're the yellow type. Then there are the greens, who are all about logic and facts. Blues want connection and familiarity, and reds are driven by competition. So the marketers, they try to figure out which type you are and then tailor their pitch to you. Like for the yellows, they'll talk about how buying this product helps a charity.
So it's like a psychological cheat sheet for getting people to do what you want. Kind of manipulative when you think about it.
For sure. But the book says that understanding those basic motivations, it can help you be more persuasive in general.
Well, that makes sense. And speaking of persuasion, the book talks a lot about emotions and how they play into all of this. Like, it's clear that our feelings drive so much of what we do.
Absolutely. The book says that if you can make someone feel a certain way, you can pretty much predict how they'll act. They use the example of guilt, like how making someone feel guilty can make them act more considerate.
We've all been on the receiving end of a guilt trip, right? And they even give an example of dealing with a difficult boss by, like, figuring out what makes them feel guilty and using that to your advantage.
Yeah, a bit manipulative, but also pretty clever. And then they list 5 emotions that are especially powerful for influencing people: fear, guilt, and playing to someone's ego.
It's interesting to see how emotions can be used, like, strategically. But then they talk about something that I think is even more powerful,
Mm,
body language.
right. They say that when it comes to mind control and influence, your body language often matters way more than the words you say. And they get into this thing called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, which is all about reading those tiny, subtle cues, like how your skin reacts, your eye movements, even little twitches. They say you can use NLP to figure out if someone's lying, how they think, what senses they use most, even which side of their brain is dominant.
NLP always seemed kind of out there to me,
Yeah.
but the book makes it sound pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So once you've, like, analyzed all these tiny cues, how do you actually use NLP to influence someone?
Well, the next step is to mirror those cues, like subtly copy their body language and use words that appeal to their dominant sense. That builds rapport and trust. And then they do this thing called anchoring, which is like connecting a specific emotion to a certain trigger,
Yeah.
like a touch or a word. It's kind of like training someone to feel a certain way without them realizing it.
Whoa, that's getting deep into manipulation territory.
Yeah. Right. And they even say that in a way, we all use mind control every day, even if it's just trying to change someone's mood.
I guess that's true when you think about it. Okay, next up, the book talks about deception. Clearly related to manipulation, but like its own thing.
Right. They define deception as hiding your true intentions and presenting something else that's more appealing. And they say the key is to conceal the truth, but without outright lying, because getting caught in a lie can ruin your reputation. So they suggest using silence, distractions, or even just, making up believable stories to hide the truth.
So it's more about what you don't say and how you spin things than just telling straight up lies. And they even say that half-truths can be better than lying.
Yeah, a half-truth is like you're not making everything up, but you're leaving out important details or changing things a bit to fit your story. Like
Mm.
they give this example of someone using a half-truth to get out of going to a dinner party with their boss.
Smart. It's about getting what you want without telling a lie that could easily be exposed. And then the book gives us this deception toolbox, which sounds, well, kind of sneaky.
Ah, yeah. But it's interesting stuff. Like they talk about building a strong, positive personality so you make a good first impression. That means dressing well, having good posture, smiling, being confident. The idea is if you seem trustworthy, people won't suspect you're deceiving them.
It's all about appearances, right? Fake it till you make it, I guess.
Yeah.
And another tool in this toolbox is influence.
Right. They say that being influential makes people trust you more, so you can get away with more subtle forms of deception. They call it bending the truth, because if you're generally respected, people will overlook little white lies or omissions.
It's like building up a bank of trust that you could spend on little deceptions here and there. And get this, the book even tells you how to be more persuasive in group conversations, which I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, they say the people who talk first in a group, they get the least attention. So they recommend starting by acknowledging the other speakers, not being too argumentative right away, and then presenting your ideas once everyone's warmed up. Oh, and starting with something humble or self-deprecating can help too.
It's a less aggressive approach, more about getting people on your side before you make your big point.
Yeah.
And they talk about the power of using concise language too, less is more.
Totally. Being clear and to the point, it makes people see you as like more authoritative. And they make this point that influence isn't the same as scaring people. Influence comes from trust.
That's important. It's about persuasion, not intimidation. Okay, moving on. The book gets into their toolkit for persuasion. Sounds like they're about to give us some serious tips on how to get our way.
Well, they start with this rhetorical technique of answering a question with another question. It's a way to kind of throw people off balance and make your point at the same time.
They use that example from Harry Potter, right?
Mm.
Someone asks if Gryffindor is the best house, and the answer is, I suppose the others must be rather redundant then. That's a subtle burn.
Exactly. And then they talk about not using too much sarcasm because it can make people not take you seriously. Making sure your arguments sound reasonable, even if they're not, is important too because it helps people connect with you. And they say you gotta watch people's reactions carefully to see if you're getting through to them. Subtlety is key, they say, suggesting instead of demanding. And listening is huge. You have to listen to people if you want to persuade them.
The persuasion is an art form,
Yeah.
It's not just about what you say, but how you say it and how well you understand the other person. And then finally, the book defines manipulation and even talks about some potential benefits, which might surprise people.
Yeah, they define it as like carefully setting things up so that you get what you want. And they actually say that everyone manipulates to some extent, whether we realize it or not. So being aware of when it's happening to you and when you might be doing it, that's a good thing, they say. Other benefits are like understanding why people do what they do, predicting their behavior, having more control over situations, even building trust. They connect manipulation to things like emotions, consumerism, and ego, which makes sense.
So it's not always a bad thing, is what you're saying. It's more like a tool that can be used for good or bad.
Yeah.
But after all this talk about manipulation and mind control, I'm glad the book talks about how to protect yourself from it too.
Right. They call it mind defense systems. And they say the most important thing is to be analytical, to observe people carefully and listen to what they're saying. Never take things at face value, they say, and always question people's motives.
All is never quite what it seems. That's a good motto, I
Yeah.
think. And they talk a lot about learning to read people's body language, right? Like
Mhm.
that's more reliable than their words.
Exactly. They say only about 7% of communication is verbal. So, yeah, body language is huge. They mention things like tense movements, too much or too little eye contact, tone of voice, and posture. And they say to trust your gut feeling too. If something feels off, it probably is.
Yeah, those instincts are there for a reason. And the book makes a point of saying that even trusting people you're close to, it doesn't mean you're safe from manipulation. We all have to be careful.
For sure. We need to trust people to live normal lives, but we also got to be aware that anyone can hurt us. Their advice is to speak up if something feels wrong, pay attention, notice those red flags, and really examine how you react to things.
It's about being present, mindful, and trusting your own judgment. Now, the last chapter is all about practical tips for being in control. They call it an ancient art, which sounds cool.
Right. They use these everyday examples, like how plastic nails or dog sweaters are marketed to us, to show how we're constantly being influenced. They say the goal is to, like, empower you to resist being controlled, whether it's by advertising, religion, politics, or just other people. And they define persuasion as convincing someone that your argument is right, that they need what you're selling, and basically changing their mind.
So it's about taking back your power,
Yeah.
making your own choices. And they touch on NLP again, talking about how to read people's visual, auditory and kinesthetic cues to be more persuasive.
Yeah, and then they give 10 basic principles of persuasion, like using people's names but doing it respectfully, using motivating words like today or now, mirroring their language, and even mirroring their body language and tone of voice to build rapport. They call that being a chameleon. And then they stress that these techniques, they're neutral. It's all about how you use them. They give examples of good persuasion, like peace talks or inspiring people to do good things, but also bad persuasion, like what Jim Jones and David Koresh did.
Same tools, different intentions. It's like you can use fire to cook food or burn down a house. And then they end with something I wasn't expecting: delegation.
Yeah, they say good delegation is about giving people clear goals and the freedom to achieve them while also setting clear boundaries. It's a win-win because it builds confidence in the people you're delegating to and it frees you up to focus on the big picture.
That's a good note to end on, is like influence isn't always about controlling people. It can be about empowering them too.
Definitely.
So we've covered a lot today. Mind control, manipulation, deception, persuasion. It's all out there, both on a personal level and in the wider world. And while it can be kind of unsettling, understanding it can help us protect ourselves and make sure we're using our influence for good. It's definitely a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.